welcome to the Polar Opposite Podcast. This is the Cinematic Reviews, the number one podcast for cinephile observance, or just you casual moviegoers that love all things cinema. Have you ever felt that you just can't get movies or maybe even TV shows off your mind? Say you just got off work, school, maybe it's the middle of your day off, and perhaps you just got nothing really going on. Well then, this is the podcast for you. We're going to be breaking down and diving into all your favorite movies to watch and stream. I'm your host, Brendan Polar, and at my right is my co-host.
Hey yo, what's up? This is Alfred Andrew here with the Polar Opposites. Let's get some movie reviews. Let's have some fun.
Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in with us today on this show. And as always, have a great day.
And I want you all to like this, share it, comment, and subscribe. Have the day that you deserve.
Thank you so much, everybody. Okay, and we are live, back, and once again, we are here with the Polar Opposite Podcast. And as always, joining me next to me is the great Alfred Andrew. How you doing, man?
Yeah, man. Awesome, man.
All right.
Excited to be here. Excited to get some movie review going.
Yes.
Get that movie.
Yes, and we came back with you guys with one of the biggest movies on Netflix we think that's talked about right now, and we can see why. It's called The Harder They Fall, and we have some different things to say about this movie. We're both very impressed by it, but so the movie stars, let's bring up the cast right now. We have, of course, Jonathan Majors, who is a big name. If you guys are familiar with him, you've probably seen him on a couple of things. His last thing that I saw him in was he played Kong the Conqueror, I think that's how you say his name, on the Marvel TV show Loki. And Alfred was telling me he's also done some B kind of level movies. I mean, he's a working actor, so I gotta respect him for that. And then, of course, we have, as always, who's great in all the things he's in, Idris Elba playing Rufus Buck. And then, of course, I forgot to mention Jonathan Majors is playing Nad Love. Zazie Beetz is also in here playing Stagecoach Mary. And then, of course, we have the most underrated actress of working of her time, Regina King, playing Trudy Smith. We also have Lakeith Stanfield. I'm pretty sure some of you are familiar with him, playing Cherokee Bill. We have a newcomer. I've never really heard of him. Neither have Alfred or myself have heard of him. His name is R.J. Siller. He plays Jim Beckworth. And then we have, let's see, I think I always pronounce this guy's name. I think his name is Eddie Cuthuji, and he plays Bill Bickett. So we have quite a big cast here of very, if you ask me, very talented, very high-class working black actors in Hollywood today. So the movie actually is interesting. The movie kind of is about some... It's not a true story because the beginning, I don't know if you remember, they do say that it's real characters. This is more of like what we call a fictionalized retelling / depiction of real life characters. Because Nad Love, you can look it up, he was a real life American cowboy and former slave during the American Civil War. But of course, what you see in the movie is not accurately at all going to be like how it was for him. But to see... we were discussing this a little beforehand, to see actually such prominent and unknown, black cowboys, former slaves of the American culture, to actually see them get, recognition in a movie like this, because this is a big movie. You can tell they put a lot of money into this. Is amazing. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, but I just want to hear Alfred's thoughts a little bit about how he enjoyed the movie. So please tell me your thoughts about the movie, sir.
Yeah. The movie was definitely, awesome in its interpretation. Not like this necessity of there's a true story, but I think the identities that were presented, the idea of being in that time period and being a train robber or being a bandit, as you would, it's like it gives an identity because yes, we all acknowledge that like being a bandit stealing from a bank is like quote unquote wrong, and and then you look at a snippet of reasoning. Like you have Rufus Buck who virtually is working to get this town, and he's a train robber, a ruthless guy, but a portion of it is like this man gets a pardon by the governor or somebody to virtually like assassinate, or in the process of assassinating uh, uh, um I think his name is Abbott, one of the he was like a colonel, and like at the beginning of the movie they literally killed the colonel in order to like fulfill the agreement of Rufus's pardon. And so and then like the idea of like Rufus getting off the train and the interaction with Nat Love was all based in Rufus working to like establish a town, which would have given opportunities to like so many people, so many countless people, an all black founded town, Redwood. And so it's like an interesting perspective of like, you get these people who are in this situation, and it's almost like an opportunity to really see why people get in such dire straits, or not say dire, but why people choose to go rob a bank or to kill people and stuff of that nature, like to put themselves at risk and in danger like that. And it's like in one moment of perspective, it's like, oh, this guy did all this stuff in order to build this town and in some way to give people refuge and or safe haven, to grow their family and to grow life as it is understood. So it's a cool movie in terms of like being able to see identity of black people, one, and just like the idea of like the why behind people do the things that they do. And it was like a really, like, this whole movie is founded in a why.
A why.
Like when you really acknowledge the relationship of Nat Love and Rufus Buck, when you really acknowledge the twist of the movie, it's all about relationships. It's true. All about like why someone did something. This whole experience is the why someone did something.
Which brings up like a good thing that we want to talk about too, which is the opening, because the opening gets right into like, you know what I mean, like the whole thing that you're talking about, relationships, because the movie starts off with Nat Love when he's like, I guess 10 years old, with his family. Everything seems like it's just very normal. They're having like a dinner, and all of a sudden, we're not told this right away, but apparently it's alluded that it's Idris Elba's Rufus Buck's character, just a younger version of him that we don't see, breaking into Nat Love's house and basically terrorizing his family, terrorizing Nat Love, of course, and then all to lead to the fact that he kills first Nat Love's mother, and then he ends up killing his father after his father begs. At first his father begs Rufus Buck to kill him because he feels like whatever kind of quarrel that he says he has should be done with him and not his family. And then once Rufus Buck says, no, I'm going to take all you guys out except the son, which it's interesting, he kills the mother and the father and leaves Nat Love with a scar on his head. That later on we see Jonathan Majors, when we see him, like, he takes off his hat and reveals the scar that he's the grown-up version of that kid that we saw in the beginning. So it's interesting that there's a lot of, in the beginning, since the movie starts, there's a lot of alluding to what he's saying, like the relationships between these different characters. They might not tell you right away what they are, but they very much allude to like the fact that, okay, this is going to lead to something. Like there's a reason why this guy showed up. He didn't just, yes, I'm pretty sure he wanted to see, maybe if they could get his belongings from them, like steal their riches and all that kind of stuff that cowboys usually do. But there was a more, deeper layer reason why Rufus Buck was at that house. And they don't tell you right away, but when they do, like you said, the twist, everything just comes together. You're like, whoa, okay. I should have seen that coming. But the fact that they played it off so well is like, okay, even if I did see it coming, I totally forgot that would have been the twist.
Yeah.
Like, whoa.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely like appreciate how they did it. You know, the Rufus pulled out the gold guns, and they gave the idea aspect of like, I like the throughout the movie the I don't know the good word for this, but like these points of elegance. Like there's these points, these moments of like you see the pride and like the affluence in some of these people, you know, with like some of the stuff, especially, you know, later in the movie when you what was it, Haynesville or whatever, the quintessential white town.
Oh yeah.
and like
the town you've seen in every other American movie, American cowboy movie,
right.
excuse me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like so it's like you get this super bland, you know, white town where all the setting is white, and then it's like well then you have, you know, Redwood, or you have any of these people's guns, like was it Bill Pickett's guns?
Oh yeah.
You know, his guns were very like detailed and ornate, and like, you know, you tell he put time into crafting his gun, because back then it's like a gun was very customizable. You could literally like piece together different parts, you know, and it was like it's just awesome that they showed the detail. And so you know, moving forward, I really appreciated the like once you acknowledge Nat Love, and you acknowledge the whole relationship of like that first interaction when you see Bill Pickett, or not Bill Pickett, but Jim Buckworth is who I was talking about, who has the fancy guns. But when you first interact with Jim Beckworth and Bill Pickett, and then you get the first experience of Monroe Grimes, which is played by Damon Wayans Jr.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about him.
You have the experience of like one, you tell that, you know, Nat Love's gang, his crew is like they're all top level because they're like Deadeye, like freaking Bill Pickett just like sharpshoots everybody off, you know, like one shots everybody.
Yeah, pretty much.
And then the actual interaction is that they stole, Nat Love gang stole money from
Rufus
Buck at the end, like at this exchange, and it comes up this is money from Rufus, and so it was cool because you know from that moment you go to Nat Love, and then you come to realize like, oh, Nat and basically you acknowledge who Rufus is, because okay, now I know who Nat is. Okay, Nat is going after Rufus. And now, okay, Rufus is the guy who killed his parents. Oh, okay. Now
Everything's
we know his
trying to
name.
connect.
Yeah,
Yeah.
now we know his name.
Yeah.
And so now you have this space where it's like, okay, well, if anybody's watched a basic movie, now you see the inline plot, you know, come together because, you know, some money that Bill and Pickett and Beckworth thought that they were just stealing some money from a train because they was like, oh, we're just like, you guys stole it from a bank, and now we're stealing it from you. Okay, you know,
it works out.
Some Robin Hood level stuff,
yeah.
You know. And then it's like, oh no, it's from Rufus Buck, and Rufus Buck is just that name that you know makes chills down people's spine in that space. And so then you then it's like it transitions to that scene inside the train to where like, you know, where Regina King, Treacherous Trudy, and Lakeith Stanfield, Cherokee Bill go in and actually go to save or to free Rufus, and that was pretty cool. What did you think about that scene?
Oh, I thought that sequence was amazing. Actually, we talked a little bit about that too, like you know, because the movie takes place during, we discussed the 1800s, early 1800s, I guess.
Sure.
So, you know, he said it was just a good point that there's like, you expect it to be like this, you know, kind of space of like, you know, of course, you know, where a lot of these like white prominent Southerners are coming from, and you expect there to be like some kind of reaction to like these people, these, you know, these black robbers and stuff like that. And it's mostly alluded to, but they don't really get into, which is kind of interesting. But I actually kind of like that. I thought it was kind of a different take to actually not really have like so much. I mean, I know it's there, but not to focus so much on the elements of racism that was, I know, very prominent. To just kind of like have these white people like almost like it's like today, just see them as, oh, you guys are just, you guys of course are like, the color of your skin isn't as significant as the fact that you guys are trying to rob us and possibly kill us. That's all we see. We don't really see, your color so much as we see that the fact that you're threatening to kill us. Because there's a gentleman, right? You know what I mean? There's a gentleman who goes up to Lakeith Stanfield, and he's kind of like, as Lakeith Stanfield, I love it, says, oh, you're the hero of the story. There's always got to be somebody who sticks up, And the guy, says, oh, something along the lines of, why don't you get out of here and get lost, you motherless, you gutless mother, or something like that. And it's kind of like, I mean, it's very prominent, the language of that time period, but it's also like very elegant, and the fact that, he's insulting him, but he's also like kind of like saying, oh, like, I see what you're doing. Like, I know who you are. Like, because apparently, I think, what's his name? Cherokee Bill?
Yeah.
Yeah, like, Cherokee Bill is, from this movie's, like, history, seems like it's a very prominent name. So everybody knows who that name is. But, like I said before, they don't see, like, the fact that, he's, a colored, cowboy so much as the fact that they see, like, this guy has a reputation. I don't want to say the wrong thing to him. Otherwise, I will get killed. And what's funny is that regarding that thing is that, because the Keith Stanfield says, after that, he says, well, I might enjoy actually inflicting pain, because he says that I don't enjoy it. And then the next thing he starts, I love that sequence where he's like, takes the knife and he goes to the guy's legs. I mean, the way it was just choreographed was so perfect. I was like, oh my God, like, this is hilarious. Like, it's hilarious, but also like really kind of like unsettling at the same time. It's like that good Tarantino balance a little bit. I liked how they have that in the movie. And then, of course, that leads to the fact that one of the, I guess, American civil rights soldiers, civil American soldiers, comes up. And he, at first, tries to act, he's a young guy, like super young, probably like in his 20s or whatever. And he comes up and he's like trying to intimidate Lakeith Stanfield as Cherokee Bill. And the Cherokee Bill doesn't fall for it at all. And he even asks him, he says, how many soldiers do you have waiting for us on the other side of that train? At first the guy's like says, oh, it's 30. And he's like, no, it's not. And then he's like, okay, yeah, it's like closer to like at least 10. And he's like, okay, well, you don't say anything to them, you don't make any moves, I'm gonna act as calmly as possible, and everybody walk out as okay, even though you know that some of these motherfuckers are gonna be dead. So, he does everything. He's very cordial. I really like how, cordial Lakeith Stanfield's Cherokee Bill is, even when he's about to kill you, And then he says, look, I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to hurt, your fellow soldier, but don't give me a reason to. And so it's funny is that, once they kind of give him everything he wants, they let him in, they put down their rifles, they give up Idris Elba's Rufus Buck, it pretty much like just says, okay, like once that's done and the task is done, it's like, all right, you know what? It wasn't even so much that he changed his mind. It's like, like I was planning on killing you guys anyways, but I just wanted a more prominent reason to like give you a reason to die. And it's like he even says, okay, you here can drive a train. And of course, ironically, it was the first person that they found, which is the young soldier dude. And then turns out, okay, he's like, all right, you know what? That's cool. Keep everybody except him, is his words. And next thing you know, their guns blazing, they're shooting everybody down, except of course the young guy. And it's like they even kill, I think they say it was either like somebody close to him, like it might have been his dad on I think it was. Yeah.
It was his dad.
It was his dad. That's what I thought. They did mention that. So it's like they have no fucks given. They're just like, yeah, you're gonna die. We're gonna kill everybody, your family even, and we're gonna leave you alive. But hey, you know what? Your time can come too. And so your purpose with us is served. So it's kind of interesting. Like there's kind of an element regarding that, the fact that you see these people as the villains, the proper term, the antagonists of the story, and yet even at one point, Regina King, I think, she comes up and she says to one of the soldiers the fact that they murdered and slaughtered a whole town, they said, of like women and children. Yeah. So there's an element of like the fact that maybe perhaps this is a time period, especially where there really were no good guys and bad guys. It was kind of just, you know what I mean? You just get by, you do what you got to do. Sacrifices will be made. Sometimes bloodshed will be made, but it's just kind of part of the job.
Yeah.
That's the element I got from it. So that's actually why I really enjoyed that scene. I'm glad you brought that up because it really gave a good depiction of the fact that there really was no good or evil in this
Yeah.
time period.
And that's true too, because that also gives perspective to the time period, and like, because like you always get this like the identity of like, especially in that era, like, you know, when you come up from the cowboy 50s era, I'm sure there's more depiction of the police or like the colonels of that time being the quote unquote saviors, you know, saving people from the Indians or something like that, you know, and like the you know, just kind of like the old school style place, because the government wants to build support for military so they can do more military endeavors, and so the reason why that's cool to acknowledge, because it exactly what you said, it doesn't give anybody like, oh, you could be white, you could be a colonel, you can be anybody, and it doesn't matter, and it's like it's like really being present to like yeah, like even again, like even though kind of like where I led off in the beginning, you have this space where you have Rufus Buck as this ruthless guy, but when you look at his intentions of robbing trains and all this different stuff is to build a town. People are going to thrive in this town, you know, and now you have this identity of like this other guy who's this colonel, and like I feel like his name is like Abbott something, and like for whatever reason I have this memory of like this colonel being like a prominent colonel. Like if you was to research this guy's name, you'd probably like Wikipedia might have his name pulled up, and so it's like to say like this might be some great American hero, and then like in the actual history of life he actually did that, and then they said it in the movie, you know, so it really can personify like this great American hero has dirt. And like, so it, like you said, it doesn't allow for any pedestals to be placed.
Yes.
Oh, we're talking about a band of people who killing people. But technically the people who would be personified as the good guys, this guy who led them went through and killed and you know, pillaged this town, you know? And so it's like, it's cool in that way, which also in that scene, you also have the moment of when Treacherous Trudy pulls out the pardon.
That's true.
She acknowledges that she was telling a story in like a third person, and she was telling the story about Abbott, and she didn't acknowledge that he was Abbott. She just acknowledged the story about the man, and then it was like, okay, well, she was something about like, oh, you know, you're about to break free some ruthless guy, and she started going the story about, hey, this colonel who did all this, you know, murdered all these people, and who was so ruthless that the government didn't even want him. And like, and so the idealistic aspect of what I got out of that was Treacherous Trudy had a real pardon in her pocket for Rufus Buck. She wasn't just breaking him out to break him out. He had a pardon.
He did.
And in that way, the reason he got it was like, say Treacherous and them made a deal with the governor that if they killed Abbott, they could free Rufus. And that's what I got out of that exchange in the movie, which was the idea of like your government just sacrificed you because you're so evil. it's like
oh, that's right. She says she says something along the lines of like the government trusting or not trusting its man or its best man, something along those lines, that's so crooked. Because she said those words, like, you know, that they would like never look back at you because like you are well known for like being so crooked that no one wants to work with you.
Right.
Something along those lines,
exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And so that was really cool for me because again, you have this perspective of like these guys are so ruthless, but like you then give the reality of like how life works, and it's not like good or bad. It's not like race or anything. You know what I mean? Because like again, you talk about this idea of like this era of like personified slavery. So why are they handing pardons out? Like you could just get some regular ruthless person to just randomly kill this guy in a bar one night. You know what I mean?
It's
like
true.
adverse to like talking to a known like this gang of bank robbers to then give a pardon to a other known like ruthless bank robber to like go kill a cop. You know what I mean? It's like
true.
it's like why would we go through all these lines of action to give official pardons? You know, like that wouldn't party somebody's record book because technically he was on a train to a jail, and then I mean not to say the jail wouldn't have did whatever when you received the pardon, but it's like that was like in another state. So why are we gonna wait till it go to another state? You know, it's like we're gonna break them free now.
Yes.
And so and like if you say something, they got a pardon. So it's like and like so my point. We can move forward in a second, but it's like my point is just like the reality of like how. Again, it's not like an idea of race. You know, the government wouldn't have made a deal with a group of black people if it was just about race.
Exactly.
You know, so and that's really cool in like a perspective, right? So like move forward, it's like once we acknowledge that okay, Rufus is free now, and that was actually a really cool moment. There's a moment inside of like some really good art moments of the movie. Is when Idris stepped out of the jail cell.
Oh, yeah.
There was this moment where it was kind of like a almost like a reverberation.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, kind of like a thing. A wave went over the screen, and what I got out of that, it was like when Idris took that breath. Like we don't know how long he was in chains. Like he could have been locked up for some years. So it's like it was like this moment of like he finally was able to come back to himself.
Right.
You know, he was like locked himself away mentally, and now he unlocked himself.
You know, you bring up a good point. Even so much that like that cell that they had him in, like you look at it and it's like I was questioning how he could fucking breathe in that thing because it's so damn dark. He comes out and like the light illuminates his face for the first time. It's almost like something out of a fucking horror movie. It's like whoa, like it's kind of like you bring up a really good point. It's like what were the conditions of like his transporting from like the jail to another, like they probably didn't give a shit about him. It's like you can't breathe. Oh well, you can deal with it. You'll be fine.
Yeah, he wasn't breaking out of that. That's all they knew.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like,
pretty much.
It's like it is cool in that space because like you get that moment and then you transition back to Nat Love and the gang's together and they're acknowledging Damon Wayne's character. And they acknowledge that, oh yeah, the money that we just stole is actually Rufus's bucks. And then we have this interaction of like, oh, who Rufus Buck is, and like we acknowledge like, oh, they have a past, and we already got that they had a past about Rufus Buck between
Nat Love
and Zaza, her
Zaza
character,
Beetz.
Mary Fields.
Yeah.
And so because they have obviously an old love relationship, and so now we acknowledge like okay, well Nat Love is about to go out, like he actually frees Monroe, which is Damon Wayne's character, so that he can virtually tell, or I don't know, you would imagine it's like okay, well we're gonna free you Monroe so that you can go tell,
right, pass along the message.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm gonna let you live so you can pass the message, and so it's actually kind of funny because he never actually passes the message as it comes to the reality. Like there's never any message of like anything. Like he comes in later out of nowhere actually, but anyway, it's cool because the next scene goes into well actually before that they introduce Cuffy, but Cuffy's a really cool character inside of this movie. Cuffy played by
I almost forgot
Daniela.
Daniela.
What's her name? Daniela.
Daniela Deadroy. Deadweiler, thank you.
Yeah, as Danielle Deadweiler, and it's cool because she plays like a really cool character. She plays like the real butchy person, who looks more like she plays being the guy because it seemed like it suits who she is, and it's like a little bit easier for her. It's like she seems actually, it's like not like it's like, it's almost like a person who's had trauma. And you can acknowledge that there was like especially likely trauma in her life of experience, and which leads her to why she puts on the boy persona, because everybody acknowledged her as a boy, and they respect her and such, and to the point like later on in the movie where she has to wear a dress, and then everybody was like, oh, the guy RJ
RJ Sealer.
Yeah, what's the guy's name?
Jim Beckworth.
Beckworth.
Yeah.
Beckworth is like, oh, he's like, I thought I was like falling in love with a boy for a second. It's like, cause like you look at her, you like kind of can tell. But I imagine, you know, like in subtle situations, there's like real realities where like, you know, people dress up and you couldn't tell what gender they are just based upon, you know, certain angles or the way they hold themselves. You know what I mean? It's like, and if you would have met her at the juke joint, you ain't about to talk to her like no female. Like she in that scene where they introduce her, the guy tries to walk past her and like she takes out those brass knuckles and she like cold cocks him and knocks him on the floor. And so it's like, oh, you immediately know that she is not the one to be messed with. You know, you can say, oh, she's a little girl all you want to. She'll break your jaw, you know? Yeah. And so...
and as soon as I knew this, as soon as she gave you those eyes too, when they got all big, I was like, oh, fuck, nah.
So it was funny. Yeah, so it's like, I think, you know, one of the cool spaces around that was... what do you think about when like they finally they start progressing towards the action, which is when Bass Reeves come in, and you know they actually don't talk about Bass Reeves' character.
No, they don't.
They didn't actually put him in here, which is like which is funny because he's the most top actor in the whole movie. Like he's like the oldest actor. Like I've seen this man since like the 80s. Like I know he has
around
movies
that
since
long.
the 80s.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like that guy. Like he's played so many people's daddies.
He really has. He really has.
It's like,
and he always plays that dad of like, man, I hate you're dating my daughter.
Right.
But I have to respect you or acknowledge you.
Exactly.
But I hate you.
He's that hard nosed guy.
Yeah.
And so it's it's funny. Because like to know about Bass, he's like a really dope cowboy himself. And what do you think about like the whole space of where they did the whole introduction of Bass to Nate?
What do you mean, like the whole introduction?
Well, because like you know Bass walks in and everyone knows who he is. You know he's well known.
Yeah,
and he's a sheriff.
He's a sheriff. Yeah.
And they even like Cuffy and him have like an interaction. And then you get this moment where like he pulls out the gun on Nate and like everybody starts standing up and gets all hyped because you know he put a gun on the leader.
Right.
And then like they leave. And then like it comes off to a twist of like, oh,
they know each other.
And he commissioned Bass to go take care of Buck. Like, oh, we're about to go handle him. We know he's in Redwood, he's free, you know what I mean? And it's like, so you know, let's go handle it. And it comes to find out that the first time Buck got in prison in handcuffs was due in part to Bass. Like Bass took him in the first time type stuff. Like so in that way it's like, you know, it's like Bass kind of has a subtle vendetta. Like
he does.
You can't leave after I put you in.
Yeah. Once you're here, you're here.
Yeah, and technically you would say that Bass as a police officer had no reason except for personal vendetta because again, according to Church's Trudy, for that piece of paper to be real, that man had a real pardon. He was a free man. It was like he had no legal offenses against him.
Exactly.
You know, like he was a good citizen at that point according to the law.
Yeah.
And so it was very interesting that dynamic, right? So it's like, okay, now you have this space where they're about to leave, and then of course everybody shows up. Oh, we're not leaving without us. You know, we gotta be a gang.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it was cool in that space, just really acknowledging that. But like, yeah, like what was like a notable part for you though?
As far as like the interaction between those two, Bass Reeves and Nat Love.
Yeah, progressive.
Yeah, I thought that what you're saying, the relationship was very interesting, and it seemed like even though it wasn't quite like you know, like there's a lot of things in this movie that I want to say that aren't acknowledged, but there's so much alluded to that you can, as a viewer, kind of get the context behind. Like what I felt was that Bass Reeves' character, you know, since we did see at the beginning of the movie, and you know, it's kind of ironic that they even share a lot of similarities in like looks, but like, you know, like between Nadlev's father that dies at the beginning of the movie and Bass Reeves, it seems like Bass Reeves was kind of like the closest thing that Nadlev had to like sort of a father figure. That's kind of the prominent role that I thought he kind of served to Nadlev. Not exactly like being full on like like replacing like because that's not the acknowledgement I got at all. It was more like Nad Love didn't have parents or any kind of proper upbringing. So he had to pretty much teach himself from the ground up, like how to raise himself. And it seems like at one point, some point in his life, when he first met Bass Reeves, it seemed like they immediately had, of course, this dynamic, of like, I don't know if I can trust you per se, but there's definitely an element of respect between them. And now that they're much older, like Bass Reeves is like ancient, and fucking Nat Love is like I think in his like 30s, and it seems like there's really like this now it went from this prominent of respect to like there's so much of a bond between them. That's what I got, and I think the movie portrays that very well. I think you kind of get this element of like this is the guy that like had because it's kind of interesting. I don't want to spoil too much of the twist, but it is kind of relating to like the relationship that happens and something to do with Nadilov's father that is end up being revealed. That you're kind of like, I have to wonder if Nadilov's father had actually lived and maybe had not even gone through that change that was mentioned that he had gone through before he was that born again man. If he would have been like Bass Reeves' character, or maybe not a sheriff, but Bass Reeves was like someone I would definitely list under the lines of like he's definitely a double agent kind of person. He kind of works for both sides. It's to him it's kind of what benefits him. If he says that okay, like Rufus Buck is gonna like kind of pay him a certain fine and he's gonna be okay, he would go to Rufus Buck because it's like okay, I'm just doing my job. It's just who has more money, who has more allegiance with people. It's that kind of thing. Even things that are going on with fucking today that's still relevant. I really got that feeling from him as a character. I didn't really like it. Goes back to that element of like there really are no good people, bad people. Everybody just does what they have to do just to get by. Right. And Bass Reeves was really that kind of empathy of like, or the epitome, excuse me, of like that kind of character of like I'm here for my job. I'm a sheriff, but I work with both sides. I do what I got to do to get by.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
He definitely threw his weight around.
He did.
In terms of just having the bad, and like the bits and pieces I know about Bass Reeves is like he definitely was like that cowboy guy who was out there on the range, mm-hmm. and I want to say like even back in that day like even today it's like a very interesting space because the idea of a sheriff, like the sheriff is not they're not hired. Okay, so let me say it like this: sheriffs are independent contractors.
That makes sense.
So everything you're saying is absolutely true because like the idea of like a sheriff is typically you're contracted by like a county or by a town. Like so like literally here in Orange County, you have places that like are like you'll see more sheriff's departments than you actually see a city of police officer. And like especially when you go towards South Canada, like Rancho Santa Margarita, for instance. Rancho Santa Margarita is not big enough, like population-wise, to even have enough human beings from that town to even be their cops. So the idea is that like you don't have enough population to just supply cops for you, so you would need the county of Orange to supply cops for you. So the county has a sheriff's department, state highway patrol, and they Rancho Santa Margarita hires those sheriffs. So idealistically, Bass Reeves gets hired by towns. He gets hired by the county, by the governor. He isn't just the city of's police officer. So exactly what you said. Like he does play both sides contextually. He does. Because like when he's not being hired by somebody, he might throw his weight around. I'm not saying Bass specifically, but like as a sheriff, could throw his weight around and like, hey, like I'm coming into this small town and this is where I'm going to set up. And if you want to not get ran over by the gangs out here than like, hey, you need to like pay me a stipend, you know, and it's like, and in the subtle space, it's not. You could almost say, well, you just gonna hire me, and my fee is gonna be this much, like super big. You're gonna give me a ranch. I need some heads of cows, you know, just so that I can stay here.
Sure.
You know, and which makes sense contextually if he's gonna protect the city as like a true honorable police officer, person of law.
Yeah.
You know, but I'm just giving the context. I'm just deepening the context of what you're saying, like, or deepening the perspective of what you're saying, and like how true it is to kind of be a quote unquote double agent. And so, you know, like definitely once like
that's a good point.
They the whole gang actually assembles and they start like pushing towards like you know, going after Redwood. It was so funny how like how Mary Fields and Nat, they come together, and Nat's like really trying to profess his love, which is actually pretty cool because you get the idealistic aspect of black love, or even like male love, like being a man and having love. You know, it's almost like this, like to be a cowboy, you're always on the range. You're not really out here thinking about. Not to say you're not thinking about it, but it's just like you're just out on the land. You're not back home, quote unquote. Especially even as a bandit. You know what I mean? So it's like you have this space where he really loves her and he wants to be with her. And it's kind of like he needs to do this one last thing to where he in his heart can be satisfied.
Sure.
You know, Rufus killed his daddy and his mama, so like, he need to do that.
Yeah.
And then like you get this reality where it's like she's like, okay, well, I'm about to go and basically be I'm about to go scout, and then she ends up getting kidnapped once she goes into Redwood by treacherous Trudy.
That's right.
And their interaction was kind of funny. What do you think about their the fight scene? That conversation. Well, not the fight scene yet. There was a conversation scene when Tretch was talking about her sister.
His sister, yeah, she
What do
died
you
from
think about
polio.
that?
I thought that was excellent, and that actually adds to my whole thing about how I love Regina King and everything she's in, because, like, just it was so interesting to like see these two, like, you know, no pun intended, polar opposite like characters, like you know, like actually like, because you have Zazie Beetz, who is, you know, like the very opposite of like, you know, treacherous Trudy, and you know, even so much of the fact that like, you know, I don't really know too much about Zazie Beetz's character, like what her, besides being like the prominent, you know, female role to an interest, you know, to Nad Love. I didn't really get a feel for like who she is of a person outside of this, like, you know, but I really like from this story and this acknowledgement, I totally got like the feel of like who, and it makes sense why treacherous Trudy is the way she is, because she mentions having, you know, lost her sister to polio, and then on top of that, you know, there was that whole great story of the fact that, you know, when her sister got herself hurt, which she had never seen before, you know, that her dad like was alluded to be a very abusive man. And that's kind of something that I guess is alluded to a lot of different, because even Nad Love mentioned, not his, but somebody else mentions to Nad Love that his father at one point before becoming a born again man was a very abusive person, even to his own mother. So having abusive fathers, at least in this story, seems to be like the prominence of like what kind of you know, catapults our characters into being the way they are. You know, because treacherous Trudy mentions that she was, you know, she got her ass beat, you know, the fact that she didn't protect her sister. And then, you know, by the time she came and saw her sister again, her sister was dead from polio. So, like, there's this acknowledgement of, like, the fact that treacherous Trudy never really had. I mean, you got that context just from her interactions from different people. But really to actually hear her monologue and hear her story and how personal it sounds to her, you really get that acknowledgement that she never had a proper, not even just childhood, but a proper upbringing. So what she learned, how she acts, and especially how she acts in today's world, is very much the reaction and, you know, the culmination of her upbringing and her relationship. Mention that again, relationship with her family, not just her father, but her relationship with her sisters as well, because she even mentions that, you know, from the acknowledgement, the tone, she mentions that one of her sisters laughed when her sister fell and she says, there my sister was, laughing her ugly ass face off. And it's like, wow, like just that comment, that tone alone, and the way that Regina King, beautifully portrays that, it says so much. It's like, wow, the difficulties she probably had with her family, that it's almost like maybe in some way she saw it as like it being like a relief or a release, from that burden of her family once her sister died, and she distanced herself from the family as much as possible and became a bank robber with Rufus Buck and Cherokee Bill. That was kind of like, in some way for her, that was her being born again, was like, I'm distancing myself from my family and who they are, and I'm proving to them that I'm nothing like them, and I'm doing everything I can to be nothing like them. Does that make sense? Because what's interesting about that is, that's why I love this movie and how relevant it is, even though it takes place at a certain time period, is that we have people, like, forget color, we have people of all sorts of different colors and minorities. I know personally that I can tell you that are exactly like that. For example, without getting too much into it, a little bit of my parents, but especially my own mother is like that. From her own upbringing, she's done everything she can to be as distant from both her sister, my aunt, and my grandmother as well, to be her own person. And I can see that translating into someone like Treacherous Treaty, the fact that she wants to be her own woman. And even if she's doing things that aren't at all, if you want to call it, because there really is no right and wrong in this time period, but even if they aren't quote unquote, ethical or logical or whatever kind of right you want to call it, it makes sense, the fact that why she's making these choices. Everybody, that's what I was going to say, every person in this movie, you understand why they're making the choices they're making. It's like, you don't really question everybody. You're like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I totally get why you are this person you are today. Yeah. So that monologue was such a great insight into her as a character, and gave you a great insight into why she is the person she is. Yeah. So I really did enjoy that scene.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And definitely, like, in that way of, like, acknowledging, like, the treacherous aspect of, like, she killed the girl who pushed her sister down.
That's true.
And then her dad beat her, and then, like, dad found out. That's like, oh, I virtually beat you for nothing, because it was only assumed that, because she broke her ankle, that she didn't do anything. And then I guess, she couldn't, like, wall off and say, oh, I just killed this woman. What's she going to say? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, but then she comes to find out. And then it's kind of an interesting space, because it's like, you almost think that, like, the dad was actually afraid of her, because it's like you would imagine, like, he, like, in that time period, someone, like, has a broken ankle and she has polio, broken ankle is probably like a quintessential death note, anyway, because it's like, now what are you going to be able to do? And
right, no
to
doctors.
take care of you is like such a hard thing. Exactly, yeah. No doctors. So then it's like, that's one level of it. And then it's like, okay, you didn't protect anybody, and that's another level. But then it's like, okay, well, you just literally took this woman's knife and gutted her up, and it's like this little girl or whatever, and it's like, well, dang, like that probably was, the way she did it might could have been real heinous, to where it was like, man, which is kind of funny that, like, she wouldn't have had no blood on her, to where it was like, the dad wouldn't have known, but some people could have been drunk and could have been in a rage and not paying attention to type stuff, to where it was like, those type of things would have been details to pay attention to. We just know that little girl's ankle is broken, and you walked in here and nothing. I mean, not to say nothing happened, but in the sense of like, it happened. So, and like, but yeah, like, it was interesting in that space, to where, like, you go into the actual fight scene once everything starts happening. Well, I guess we can set up the fight scene in the sense of, like, the idea of the space, because after Mary Fields gets kidnapped, and then everybody comes into town, like the Nat Love gang comes into town and acknowledges, like, okay, here's the deal. We're gonna give you money. We're gonna exchange for the girl, and then you get Beckworth, who's been talking the whole movie about being the fastest quick draw, and then you got
Lakeith Stanfield.
Lakeith Stanfield, who's like known as the quickest draw, and so then you have that scene where it's like, it's kind of funny, because you really get to see Cherokee Bill's true colors. Because, like, Cherokee Bill is, like, it's very funny, because, like, he has all this acclaim. Like you said earlier, people know his name. And it's like all this acclaim. So it's like it was an interesting space of storytelling, because it's like people don't always tell what really happened. They tell the how great and like the romanticize it. So it's like we just know that he's the fastest person and he kills people, and he survived all these gunfights. But then you take an acknowledgement of, like, in the very first fight, he was having a fisticuff fights with a guy. He hit the guy and then dipped down and sliced the guy's ankles off.
That's right.
So he didn't really fight this man fair. He didn't technically win the fight.
No.
You know what I mean?
He
like,
cheated, if
he
anything.
cheated. Like, he actually used the weapon, and Treacherous Trudy helped him. So it's like he didn't really, quote unquote, win the fight in a fair way to where he's like a big man. And then you have this moment where, like, Beckworth is like, he's like a very show flashy guy, and he's like, Cherokee's like, all right, you count. And Beckworth gets to like 3. And Cherokee,
not even that. He cuts him at like 2. And
it shots him in the
shoots
face.
him to
And so it was kind of this funny moment where it's like, oh wow, you shot this guy in the face, like, yeah, and like he was like, like,
why do they always talk so slow?
Yeah. And then Pickett gets all upset, and he's like the sharpshooter, and like he kind of gives the element of surprise away, and now the fight starts, and so like you see everybody. What's so cool about it is like how it's like I love power scales, because like you really get to see how good of shot everybody is, and compared to everyone else, like the whole other gang and stuff, and like because you see their guys just shooting at, like, motherfucking Nat Love is literally just walking through town just shooting people, and then like crossfire and stuff, and like there's a scene where him and I want to say it's Mary Fields is in the middle of the street doing that back-to-back kind of a scene where they're shooting folks and stuff, and then it's like and then it's just like it gives quality of like one, they're really good because it's hard to shoot a gun. Like even today's Glock 40s, they're accurate as fuck, but guns still hard to shoot. You got drop, you know, after a certain distance, wind and things of that nature. Shit is real. So like you really gotta know how to aim. And so like when you see these people getting shot, and like I love like the actual like the way they did the kill scenes, because they were very expressive. Like, they like the bullets was really good, like the splatters. But like you see Nat and all them one-shotting folks, and then like you see all these other people like just shooting, and then it's like you see Nat Love does get shot though, like at a point to where he does get shot, and that's cool. Like he just shot it right in the heart, basically right in the shoulder. And so it's like, okay, like you get to see his resilience, because like he's like, nothing's gonna stop me. Like there's nothing that's gonna make me feel this right now, And then like even kind of before that, you see the scene where the big guy is like hitting that in the stomach, and like just breaking his ribs basically, and the guy's just like,
you're talking about when he's hanged up, right?
Exactly, when he's hung up, and like so I'm like going backwards actually in a scene. So in the way prior to this, the first interaction right after Mary Fields gets kidnapped, Nat Love goes in to talk to Rufus, and then like the big guy that's in the movie is like hitting Nat in the stomach. So it's like another moment of watching Nat's resilience. Like he just literally got beat, and he's like, they hurt you pretty bad. He's like, I'm gonna kill him. That's all he thinks about. Like he's like, I'm just like, I can't wait to get free so I can kill you. it's like this doesn't hurt
pretty much,
because
that's always in his mind
to think about. And so that's actually funny, because that guy, he talks junk to Bass Reeves, and he's like, I bet my right hand I got more bodies than you. And then there's a scene where they blow up the money, and when they blow up the money, the guy standing right next to the cart, and you see an arm fly, and Bass Reeves is like talking to I think Lakeith Stanfield, and he's like, because they got a gun on him. He says something. He's like he says something to the extent of like, he like asks him a question. He's like, I don't know. He's like, but is that a right arm? So it's like, it's just this moment of like, he's not worried about nothing right now. He's like I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm like, but is that a right arm? I just want to know, because he made a bet with me.
That's true.
it's like
See, that was what I was talking about before, about how this movie like has like actually really good balances of like the comedic shit.
Yeah.
Because like there was another moment that Bass Reeves has, where I forgot where it is, where like I think it's a little earlier before that, where Jonathan Major's character is talking about like how he was making some kind of like threat. And then how like Pastor Reeves says like, man, boy, like why do you got to say some stupid ass shit like that and get me involved?
Yeah.
I love that.
A lot
though.
of funny stuff.
Yeah, a lot of it.
And yeah, and so with that, it was real cool to like. I feel like some of the things I really liked about it was like the idea of like the historical reference of all this. You know, I guess like kind of like wrap it up a little bit.
Yeah.
It's like yeah, it was really cool to like once you get to like the ending scene aspect of like when you actually get Rufus and Nat together.
Yes.
And you actually start talking about like
their history.
The history.
Yeah.
And like I love the storytelling.
So did I.
The storytelling is so they tell these stories in like this omniscient third person.
That's a really
to
good
where
way to
like
put it.
you don't know who we're really talking about until you like just are paying attention, and then it's like he starts talking about like he tells something to the extent of like he started talking about Nat's story about like the interaction of like going in and talking about how I killed your people and like like you're about 10 years old, and then he goes into the story about himself about like he was like when I was a kid my dad
was not a good man.
Was not a good man. He beat my if my mama overcooked his food, he beat her. If she undercooked him, he beat her. And then he's like to the moment where like he actually I think stood up to his dad. And she went to protect him, and he beat her so bad he killed her.
Yeah.
And then like he left, and then he's like and he changed his last name to Love. And then it was like, oh, that was his daddy.
That was a twist.
Yeah.
That was a twist. And then he's like, you a buck.
Right.
You a
He's
buck.
He said Nathaniel Buck.
I love the way he put it too. He was like, you a goddamn buck.
Right.
All right? You hear me, boy? There's no way to put it. We got the same eyes, the same daddy, the same goddamn last name.
And it was so good too because then you start seeing Eve just tear up. And it's like how real it is.
It's true.
And it was like, oh man, like there's no like
he's making the hard ass cry.
Yeah.
Like,
this
big tough guy's
moment.
crying right now.
Yeah. It's like this isn't no like plot twist ploy.
No.
It's like there's no like, oh, he got the jump on him and he's trying to get away. It's just like it comes into it's such like did you ever watch Naruto?
A little bit, yeah.
So it's like my immediate first thought. I was like, "Oh my God, it's Sasuke and Itachi," Because I was like, "It's this older brother." Like if you remember, if like to know anything about that storyline, it's like Itachi is like the super double agent, and he literally has to kill his whole family in order to save the whole village, and more specifically, his little brother.
That's true.
And in that way, it's like he killed. Rufus killed Nat's whole family in this personified experience of like, not to say save him, but like in the idealistic aspect of like he could have killed him and he didn't, almost in a way of like retribution. Like he was like, and what he said was like it's the ultimate retribution because his dad would have left and changed his life, getting away from, let's just say he was a drunk, let's say he was a bandit. I think he was a bandit. And then like he changed his life from being a drunk bandit to a God-fearing man, a pastor. And in that way, when Rufus came and killed him, it put his son, daddy, his son Nat, on the path of being a drunk bandit. And it was like it was like the ultimate retribution, and it was cool because you got to really see. It's like this twisted like heart energy because it was like he was like, I got back at my dad, but in real life you still are my brother. You still are my little brother. Like it's almost like that's why I say the Itachi aspect, because he had the heart. He marked him, because like, and in whatever way, it's like he could have been that guy and could have come back and killed him, and he could have been like. Well,
he said really quick that he wanted him to like find him. He said, "I gave you that scar because I will hope that you would come out and find me one day,
and I'd be able to know you,
Yeah, right.
And so that's where it's like, oh wow, is like it was this deep experience of like, I want to see you again.
Yeah,
and it's almost like I know that passion is going to be enthralled inside of you to come see me again, find me in whatever way. And then it's like, you got our daddy blood, and it's like, and so it's like, it comes into the space of like, he even has this moment where it's like he says, Rufus says like, he's a man that like nothing will stop him. Like he said, I'm a man who always knew himself.
Exactly.
To where it's like nothing in nature is going to stop him. It's going to actually fuel and make sure he gets everything until this moment that storm comes, which is that.
Yes.
And so it was like cool in that way, to where it was almost like he finally got the real opportunity to rest, because in any other way he was always going to be that big burly guy who's going to have to like destroy everything. And destroy being like the sentiment of like yeah, I'm gonna come through and take what I want kind of thing.
Yes.
So it's like it's super interesting in that way. I really love the idea of that relationship and how it really came to be and how it all came together.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And just one last thing I want to mention really quick is that this movie has a very, at least from what I saw, because I looked it up, it has a very prominent, even the soundtrack, which is fucking fire. Like you guys, if you guys, whatever you guys have, SoundCloud, I don't think it's on SoundCloud, excuse me, Spotify or whatever, or if you just want to fucking buy it, this soundtrack is amazing. And it puts, you have people like Jay-Z, people like that are, very like today, like very center scene. But there was even a moment, and it was during one of the sequence, the gun barrel sequences, where they have I don't know if you're too familiar with the artist Seal. They have Seal, like, who I haven't fucking heard from a song, I don't know, since like maybe 2008, maybe before that. And because my parents were big Seal fans, as well as Sade, so I was actually surprised she wasn't in this movie. But Seal was like, wow, like, okay, like when he was on there, I was like, okay, this just goes to show that they really went all out for this soundtrack. I mean, they even like, they have remixes, but they even have people like Barrington Levy, who, if you guys are familiar with, in more of like the, I guess, quote unquote, the Jamaican kind of Rastafari kind of sound. He's more familiar with that. You have like so many different people of that, like, of the musical talents in this movie, and just everything, the way it comes together with like, the soundtrack and the characters and the sequences. Like, wow, like, I mean, I was blown away, and I was like, I gotta say, I was never bored at all throughout this whole movie. Like, I was enthralled. So, you can tell he enjoyed it very much as I did. And what I was going to say just really quick before I wrap things up is, this movie, like, it's getting a lot of attention, thank God. But, like, still, like, there is so much greatness in this movie that you guys need to acknowledge and watch for yourself. If you guys, what I was saying to him earlier, if you guys are, like, more familiar with, like, the 90s era of, like, more intimate, prominent, well, not prominent, not all of them were, but like, more intimate filmmakers of that period. If you guys saw movies like Set It Off, that was more about, like, you had, like, people like I forgot her name, like Jada Pinkett Smith in that movie. At the time, they were big actors, but like, it was more about the storyline, and they were just adding to it. And yes, you have people like Idris Elba, Jonathan Majors, but really, you don't see these actors so much as you see these characters. And that just goes to show how excellent these actors are and how fucking well made this movie is. I mean, Jesus, thank God. Like, we're actually, like, I was talking shit not that long ago, a couple months ago, about how streaming movies, can be whatever, and it goes to show why they're on streaming. But man, actually, to be honest, I don't think it is playing in theaters, but there is a part of me that says, oh man, they should probably release this shit in theaters, or like at the same time, or like give people more of like that kind of immersive experience. Because I mean, everything about this movie is so well done. I mean, props to, I forgot, I can't even pronounce the guy's name, but I think his name is James Samuel, who made this movie. And man, like, bravo to you and your team who made this movie, especially because this was made during one of the most fucking toughest times and the most weirdest pandemics we've ever, faced. But man, like, this movie, fuck, I can't even say anymore, guys. Like, I'm giving it probably, I would say, like, this is the first movie I'm gonna give probably a 9 out of 10. What about you, man? What do you give it?
Yeah, I definitely would say, 9 out of 10. 9 out of 10 for sure.
9 out of 10.
Great historical
Hell yeah.
reference and perspective.
Hell
given,
yeah.
Opportunity to see black people in like ownership of their own town and their own lives and rights. Just the ability to walk around free and not have this context of like, oh, some slave
a label,
just gonna some label. It's like it's really a great opportunity to see context of history. But black people have a history, and like there's prominence inside of besides like these super isolated pockets. There was just prominence all over. And so I really like the idea of even within Rufus being this evil guy, quote unquote, this guy who's like a murderer and like a bank robber. He literally was robbing banks to build this town Redwood for people to thrive in. So it just gives identity to like the why people did things, like I was saying earlier.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. So I think we'll wrap that up here, guys. Thank you so much for joining us as always, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.
Later.
Yes.
Have the day y'all deserve.
Yes, definitely, you guys. We'll see you guys again soon. Thank you so much. Bye.